Last week, a vessel owned by global shipping giant AP Moeller Maersk touched the docks of the Nhava port outside of Mumbai. The vessel was a spanking new dual-fuel methanol container carrier, Maersk's latest move in its global sustainability initiatives. But the ship also brought good tidings for the Indian market, because Maersk announced an investment plan of $5 billion for India, first in an exclusive interview to ET, then at an event to name the ship. Now, this is arguably the single biggest investment announcement that the company has made for the Indian market, a market where it has been critiqued to be very slow to expand in the last few years. Where will the investment go? Well, 80% of it will go to two Indian port projects. The Pipavav port in Gujarat, which Maersk, or rather its port operating unit APM Terminals runs, and a container terminal at the planned Vadhavan mega port project. But there are huge ifs to both investments. Well, the Pipavav investment only happens if APM Terminals gets an extension to its 30-year concession of running the port, which, by the way, is up for renewal in 2028. And the Vadhavan port investment happens if APM wins the bid for the planned terminal. Do remember that APM already runs the GTI terminal at Nhava or the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Authority. Meanwhile, despite geopolitical challenges and disruptions at the Red Sea, Maersk just announced blockbuster earnings in the year 2024. It has also recently implemented a complete overhaul of its network under the Gemini cooperation with its peer Hapag-Lloyd. The overhaul is supposed to give it cost savings of $500 million in a year. Meanwhile, also, fears of a new tariff regime under US President Donald Trump and of overcapacity of ships due to reckless expansion by ship owners across the world loom large. Where does Maersk stand on all this? To ask this question and many others, I caught up with Keith Svendsen, Global CEO of APM Terminals, and Christopher Cook, Maersk's Managing Director for India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Listen in to this very special corner office conversation. It's Tuesday, the 4th of March. I'm your host, Anirban Chowdhury, and this is The Morning Brief. Keith, Chris, very warm welcome to this episode of The Morning Brief.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Thank you, Anirban, for having me on your show.
Keith, it is an important day to be talking to you. We've just seen the inauguration, the naming ceremony of your dual-fuel ship. You've just had a very fruitful meeting with PM Modi. You've shared a huge investment number for India. We'll come to all that in a bit, but I'd like to start with you and your journey. Your bio is fascinating, and you're an absolute veteran at Maersk, not just the shipping industry. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you started as a seagoing cadet in 2004. And
it's a good day to be here with a ship.
Yes, absolutely. And you made your way to the CEO of APM Terminals in 2019. That is a steep rise. Describe a little bit of your journey to me.
Yeah, so being back in Mumbai is actually quite special for me. When I started as a cadet, the first ship I was sailing on, the second port of call was Mumbai.
Oh, really?
In 91. And if I contrast today to that experience, I think the port call was 5 days. There was a lot of waiting. The safety of the port operation was, for a young Danish person, obvious that was a little bit dangerous. So being back here 3 decades later and seeing the best shipping has to offer in a hyper-modern port is actually a very special experience for me personally.
Chris, how have the last 5 months been? You've been appointed as the head of the India business as well as Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Your previous stint was managing director of Maersk for UAE, Oman and Qatar. But even in that role, you had a firm eye on what was happening in India and the Indian business. Tell me, if we sort of add those two stints in terms of your perception of the Indian market and how well Maersk is positioned and what India means for Maersk, what are the three ways you would say it has changed or evolved in the last 5 years?
Well, Anirban, it's been a whirlwind, I have to say. Moving from the UAE, where I was based for the last 6 years, adapting to the country and, getting into our customers and learning about our business here. So you're right. I mean, India was always an important part of the business that I ran in the UAE, a lot of trade between the two economies. I think the major shift that happened was when the trade agreement, the CEPA trade agreement happened 2 years ago. And I think that's where we really started to see an accelerated, as companies on both sides were investing in each other. And that's where we really started to see an acceleration in the trade between the two countries, whether it was in oil-based products, whether it's in food-based product from India and other retail, the handicraft business. A lot of the retail chains in the UAE are buying from India. So we really saw acceleration as COVID started to come down. That trade agreement was signed, and then we started to see an acceleration in the trade between the two countries as it became easier and easier for the countries to trade.
Right. Keith, let's come straight to 2024.
Yes.
It was a challenging year, as we all know. Huge geopolitical upheavals, huge disruptions, and still it was a blockbuster year for you. It was, in fact, and I'm talking about Maersk, of course, it was the third best year in all its history. In fact, very surprisingly, and I'm quoting your CEO, Vincent Clerc, in his post-earnings call, he said that they started with a guidance of loss, and around midway in the year, I think it was changed to profit, and what a profit it was. What would be two key lessons from 2024?
So Maersk has been around for 121 years, and volatility is not new to us. I think last year was a good example of sometimes the world shifting really quickly. And in this case, the closure of the Red Sea was not predicted. And as a result of that, all the trade flows got disrupted of that. And in the process of that, the entire industry had a good year. I think the learnings of this is that when you are dealing with global logistics, the resilience and the ability to respond to events is really core for our customers and to keep world trade going.
Also, never underestimate demand, right? Because
that's it. I mean, the really cool things about global trade and trade in general is that when supply chains needs to stick together, they needs to flow. So there's no stopping the world. We need to keep it all connected and moving.
Chris, Maersk's global revenue for 2024 was at $55.5 billion. Now, analysts tell us that India accounts for 8% of that global revenue. Would you first of all confirm that for me, please?
When we look at our growth, we don't tend to publish our results at a country level basis, but certainly we can say that our business in India has grown strongly with the market. And we also believe that in the coming year, we will continue that growth. And we've made investments to ensure that we are able to deliver capacity to the market. If I talk about my ocean business or on my land side, in my warehousing and transportation business, that we're able to support that kind of growth with the investments that we have. So answering your question in a bit more of a roundabout way, I'm trying to give you a sense that yes, we've grown with the market, and yes, we're building capacity to continue growing with the market.
But 8% compared to, say, this is never a great comparison, but I'll make it nevertheless because people keep comparing India and China, and I believe China accounts for a fifth. So, if not catching up, do you see this gap narrowing in terms of how much India accounts for your global business? So what I mean is, do you see it going up from 8% in the next, say, 5 years?
Yeah, and China is often used as a reference point, but people often forget that India's services sector accounts for more than 50% of the GDP in the country, and that's not the case in China. China's growth story has come a lot more from export manufacturing. So I certainly believe that we will see more businesses. We've already seen it happen in the last couple of years as countries start to de-risk their supply chains and have China plus one strategies. And we've seen, double-digit growth with a number of different sectors. And so my belief is that 8%, of course, will expand as more businesses invest, whether they're, supporting Make in India or just selling to the domestic market. So I certainly believe that it'll come. And I won't have done my job, I guess, if we if we don't at least aspire to deliver more than that to the business.
Keith?
If you start with global trade, then I think it's important to start by saying that China is of course for the entire world super important for world export. And actually in 24 was the year China traded most with the world. So we
huge trade surplus, $1 trillion.
So we are of course proud to serve China and facilitate that trade. What is happening at the same time is that as supply chains are being diversified, both from the experience of the Red Sea, the Ever Given, the COVID experience, all the supply chains of the world, which is basically how the world economy is built up, needs to get resilience into those supply chains. And I think India has a fantastic opportunity to play a larger role in that. And as that happens, companies like ours will need to intensify the way we serve India, the way we invest here, and the way we create the opportunity for that trade actually to come in and out of India. I think actually it's a fantastic opportunity for India.
Got it. Chris, I saw some really interesting numbers in your annual report. That's the Maersk's global annual report. So when you look at geographical splits from countries, from markets, India revenue is seen to be $1.4 billion in 2023, and it declined to $1.2 billion. Now, the disclaimer given at the bottom of the note was that this is only counted for ports of discharge. So I would assume that this is only your import numbers, right? So it seems that your import numbers have declined. And how have your overall revenues, have they grown? And if so, how?
So overall, our revenue numbers, obviously, as you pointed, we had this record year in 2024. And what we, the way in which, where the freight is paid is often one of the drivers of how those revenue numbers are driven. So if your international business expands, i.e. freight paid overseas, then although it may look at a country level, the number's gone down, the total activity has gone up. And that's exactly what's happened here. So our large retail businesses, if you think about the North American retailers or the European businesses, they've grown very robustly. We saw a 12% growth in our retail business year on year, 23 to 24. All of those businesses are internationally owned businesses. So you would see the growth in those markets in relative terms. So I think that answers the question.
But has India business grown as well?
Yes,
not as chunk, but in absolute terms.
Exactly. So if I look at my volume, if I purely look at the volumetrics, then my exports and imports both have lifted year over year.
So, in India?
In India,
oh,
yes.
Okay. That's interesting.
So as I say, the point is where the freight is paid, which may drive this year-on-year adjustment you allude to. And so if a higher proportion of overseas paid, then that might drive down what looks like India-based revenue, although in the total picture, that revenue stay,
Understood. But do you see the split also changing a little bit? Now it's sort of disproportionately skewed towards ocean, which I believe is more than 80% of your India business right now, and followed by logistics. So especially on logistics, do you see growth in the chunk?
If I look at the business back over the last 5 years, we can already see that expansion of the contribution that brings to the business, the bottom line that it brings to the business. And, part of our integrator offering is that we will bring end-to-end solutions. So we believe that the logistics business will bring a higher contribution to the overall business. Our ocean business is highly cyclical, and we've seen that 2023. We saw that, sharp downturn, our largest downturn year on year in history also, from a COVID peak to a more normalized market. And if you look at the logistics business, then you will also see a difference in the contribution. So yes, we will see that logistics business starting to balance towards make a higher contribution versus the ocean business.
Got it. Keith, there has been a critique of Maersk, and including in markets like India, that you've been a little slow to sort of get into tie-ups or expand. Now, you're very clear that you're not expanding recklessly like your competitors like CMA, CGM or MSC. But a lot of M&A activity has happened in India in the last 2-3 years, right? Like, for example, MSC bought almost half of an Adani company, which is Adani Ennore. Hapag-Lloyd invested in JM Baxi. Siva Logistics bought a stake in Stellar Value Chain. So there's been quite a bit of M&A activity in the last couple of years. We've seen Maersk very, very silent. Do you think you've been slow?
I think, first of all, it's really great to see that the entire industry is excited about it. We see investments coming into the country because ultimately there will be no single operator or company that can lift all that trade that India will produce in the future. When it comes to our own company, our strategy has been to grow organically. And organic growth takes longer than acquired growth. We are, however, very keen to do more, and we are very keen to do more of these long-term investments into India's infrastructure, and of course also in the traditional areas of growing our logistics capabilities in India. So whether we're too slow or too fast, I think if we look into the future, we need to both create value and we need to capture part of that growth as AP Moeller Maersk.
Okay, you spoke about organic growth. I'd like to quote Mr. Clerk again from, and I'm sure this is the company sort of stance. And he was asked a similar question on why have you been so slow to grow? And he said, when the time comes and we feel that we have solidity in the platform from the point of view of profitability, control and tech, we will see when it's time to re-engage on M&A. And he said the two focus areas would be terminals and logistics. Now, coming to your $5 billion investment commitment that you've made to India, you said that 80% of that would go to your existing capabilities. What about new terminals? And not just Pipavav, other terminals also are coming up for renewals. Will you be aggressive in bidding for them?
I think, first of all, when we talk about the amounts that we have shared, we try to be very deliberate about what we are sharing. So here we are in a very structured process around the renewal of our concessions in Pipavav with our fellow investors there. And we have very concrete plans to invest should we be awarded the concession extension, which we have been discussing for years. So I would say this is very concrete and it's very solid. When it comes to the Vadavan project and the new megaport, we have very clearly from the beginning said that if that project materializes, it is now moving ahead on a firm timeline, we would be honored and we would be happy to compete for the privilege to be one of the several companies that would be operating that port, as is the truth today in Mumbai. So that's where the investment amounts you're mentioning is coming from. We will have to compete for that privilege and we will need to make sure that we can make a business out of it. We feel good about that. For the rest of the country, we are not sharing all our plans, but for the port space, we would love to invest also on the east coast of the country. But of course, there's many companies in the world that wants to do that, and we need to compete for that, and we need to make sure we can find good opportunities, and that's what we're working on.
Right. Because where I was coming from is Pipavav, of course, is coming up for renewal in 2028, but so are two Navasheva terminals that are currently operated by DP World. Mundra is coming up in 2031, and you've said Adani is a formidable competitor.
They are.
Would you look at either of those, aggressively bidding for either of those? Because 5 billion is a huge number.
Yeah, so I think we have enough ideas to the 5. I think the real question is not who and how are we going to split the pie of who's doing what today. I mean, if there's good opportunities come up, we look at all of these and we will compete. The real question for India is that we need a lot more port capacity. We need it for all commodities, including containers. And so the real question here for me is where we're going to build the expansion of the ports rather than just modernizing what we have. The real question is how do we build a lot more port capacity and rail capacity and infrastructure capacity in the warehousing space and the inland depots to facilitate all this trade.
How long is the 5 billion stretching? Is this 5 years, 10 years? What is?
Yeah, so our concession in Pipavav is coming to an end at the end of the decade, so that's fairly concrete and very soon. And you know the timeline of the Vadavan project as well as I do. And when the government starts that tender process, we will be there, and then we hope we will be, if not the first, then among the first who will win and pay for the concession to do that business for the future.
Would you look at acquisitions in the logistics sector in India?
I think Vincent already shared our stance on M&A at this point in time. And the choice we have made at the moment is that we will focus on getting our platforms right and grow our business organically. Of course, when you look at it over the longer future, we will always look at opportunities as and when they arrive. But our strategy is an organic growth strategy at this point in time.
Chris?
So I'll just start with a little bit of history before I answer the question. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've made a number of acquisitions in contract logistics businesses, in air freight businesses, and in e-commerce businesses.
You talk globally, of course.
Globally. Now, a number of those acquisitions, at least 2 of them, impacted our business. Impacted as in they had operations based here. We bought a German air freight forwarding business which had operations here.
Which one was it?
That was called Senator.
Right.
And then we bought a business called LF Logistics, and they had a contract logistics footprint. So those gave us some scale in the market as well.
Right.
And our CEO's comment there was more around how do we make sure we formally or fully integrate those businesses and leverage the opportunity that they gave us before further expanding. Our position in India is that we look to continue growing organically. And, there's a lot of opportunity for that. We've already talked about, we have the full product suite available. We've got a very large customer base, which we can, talk to and understand their needs. So I think we'll look at our expansion, at least as far as I see it at the moment, in an organic way before any sort of M&A type of activity that might go on. Globally, of course, that might be a different picture, but in my direct scope, that's how we're looking at.
Talk to me about Gemini. It's a huge step, right? And in fact, Vincent, in the call that I referred to, called it the greatest innovation in this space in the last, I think, 10 years.
Yes. That's the new network that we've just announced and launched a little bit over 3.5 weeks ago, which will the Gemini network will ultimately deliver 90% reliability in a market today where the average, or rather the best performer, which is also Maersk, sits around 55, 60%.
Surely, such a big overhaul would have some kind of an impact on the Indian market or on the Indian network.
Yes.
What would that be?
Yeah. So the major adjustment that it brings for the Indian market, for Maersk in India, is that we've expanded our capacity into the European market. Key growth segments for any exporters, the Make in India and the production-led incentives, which are driving the manufacturing sector and driving exports. We're facilitating that with this expanded capacity. And in addition to that, we're also expanding and increasing our reducing our lead time into North America. The collection of those 3 is a 4 to 5% additional capacity that we're going to bring on those corridors into North America and
lovely. Okay.
Europe.
Okay. And in terms of, is there a number in terms of cost efficiency that will... I mean, you aim about $500 million of savings for the entire year.
Yes.
But for India, what would it be in percentage terms? Just something for our viewers to understand.
Yeah, I don't have that number. I mean, what we've said is we aim to achieve, in the second half, for half of that number by the time we're fully integrated. So, I'll let our viewers do their own math, or your viewers do their own math on what that may be. I don't have a specific number for
Sure.
for it.
Okay. Are you profitable in India right now?
We are profitable in India, yes.
And are your profits growing?
And our profits are growing, yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Would you be able to give me a number?
No, we don't. We do, as I mentioned at the start.
We never stop trying.
I know. I should see that you're persistent for sure. But no, we don't give a breakdown at a country level.
Okay, 2 questions on 2 businesses. First, on ship repair and shipbuilding.
Yeah.
You have a partnership with Alang Shipyard. between 2017 and 2024, and I'm quoting from one of your publications, perhaps your annual report or your corporate presentation, Maersk has recycled 17 ships at the Alang shipyard. Where do you stand now? Do you want to accelerate it? What kind of customers are you getting? How does this business grow?
Yeah.
And what kind of potential do you see in this business?
So just to give a bit of a important bit of context on the ship recycling part, the traditional method for recycling vessels has been extremely filled with unsafe practices, which could be pollution, it could be exploitation of people, and bad for the destructive to the environment. And one of the things we did when we partnered in Alang, where we've made these investments, is to clean up those processes. And what we're trying to drive is that we will, recycle more vessels here as we build scale and as we see that the standards that we want to put in place, which mean that, there's not child labor in place, there's proper recycling of the materials, that we minimize any impact on the environment. So all of those are in place, and that's where we see the growth in the segment. And then in terms of shipbuilding, India has a long maritime heritage. 40% of Maersk seafarers are from India. But its shipbuilding is actually really in a very limited stage at the moment. Even in sort of recreational craft, it's not a large sector. So, we've signed up to explore that possibility of shipbuilding, and in the interim, working on ship repairs with our recent MOU that we've just signed.
You mean the MOU with Cochin Shipyard?
Exactly, the MOU.
Yeah, so yes. that was actually my next question. It's not just ship repair, but also maintenance and building activities.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the scope of that MOU. Of course, outside of what has already been reported or what you've announced, you could give me some more color on, how do you plan to expand on that? Are you planning to, how much are you planning to invest? Are you planning new facilities? Do you have internal targets, etc.? Give me some bit of where that MOU will be headed in the next 2 years. Yeah.
So of course at this stage it's an MOU. So it's a lot of what we want to do is get into that exploratory phase. We, as I mentioned, the industry is still, I suppose, has been very underinvested, and in the budget that was announced a few weeks ago, of course, there's a number of stimulus in that, which will, we hope, lift the capabilities of the sector. So, one of the things we want to do is explore the repair capabilities, and obviously that builds competence. And then alongside that, so that will be actual activity that we'll bring in, and then alongside that, we also want to bring some exploratory work around physical shipbuilding. And as I pointed out earlier, that's something that doesn't happen at scale, at least in container shipping today. Mm-hmm. So that's what we want to understand. And there's a lot of parts of that,
But do you find the environment favorable for that, the taxes, etc.?
And that's that'll be all of the things that we'll explore in this piece of the study that we're gonna carry out. And of course, it has to make economic sense for us to pursue. But you can see the intent of the government in their budget with the tonnage tax that they're putting in place and various other announcements that they've made, which and then we have to see that actually stacks up when we go and look at could we invest in shipbuilding.
Keith, do you see India making any kind of strides in shipbuilding? Because it's all allied and it has to come together if it wants to be a maritime hub.
I think India has a real opportunity on shipbuilding. First of all, India is one of the big shipbreakers of the world. And we are very proud in Maersk that we have worked with Alang to make this to European standards and really improve safety. But of course, it's a great opportunity to recycle steel inside India, both building containers, but also joining the shipbuilding industry. You have a lot of engineering talent here. You have a formidable workforce. So I think India could be well placed to play a role in the future of shipbuilding. At the moment, the powerhouses of shipbuilding is Korea, it's China, and it's Japan. And as countries move their economies through both the demographic scale and their economies, shipbuilding at a certain stage in that journey becomes less viable. And so I understand from the policymakers of India that they believe that India could be taking a role in the future of shipbuilding. we build a lot of ships, and we are monitoring that very carefully.
That is fraught with a lot of challenges, though. Since you mentioned your tech talent, I think a fifth of Maersk's global workforce is in India, but half of your tech workforce is from this country. Yeah. What kind of contributions do you think India will make to your tech innovations going forward?
We're very proud of our tech capabilities. And I think it's really rewarding, by the way, to see the talent that is access to in India. And our ability to deploy it globally, I think, is really a competitive advantage for AP Moeller Maersk.
But would you give me something more concrete on how India is contributing to maybe your tech projects, global tech projects?
Well, we are doing the engineering here, so all our platforms are being. This is the hardcore coding and engineering is happening in Bangalore, and so it's the real stuff that is happening in India with the colleagues around the world. So it's very important for our capabilities within technology.
Oh, great. Let's talk tech and sustainability. First, sustainability. Apart from this, of course, the dual fuel vessel that you've sort of announced today. In July 2024, GTI commissioned a 10.65 megawatt captive solar power plant, enabling the terminal to operate on 80% renewable electricity. What are its other plans of implementing renewable powered projects in India? And also, I wanted to ask if India features in APM's electrification program, the $60 million electrification program globally.
Thank you for that. Let me start with the ports. I mean, the way to decarbonize the ports of the world is to electrify them. Sure. And here in India, we are fairly far with both in Pipavav and here in GTI in Mumbai about doing two things: electrifying the equipment, so the cranes are now fully electrical, and also the yard equipment. But in order to make that a sustainable solution, we also need the grid to provide the clean electricity.
Which India doesn't have now.
And therefore, these PPAs is an exciting way of doing it. So the numbers you shared is a good first step on that, and we would like to do a lot more of that. And in Pipavav, it's one of our very firm commitments beyond what we have already done there is to continue to create enough wind and solar to the terminal fully green. Here in Mumbai, we're also talking with the Port Authority, and I think they deserve a lot of praise of being actually going ahead of many of their peers in the world on how we can bring shore power to the ships. So when the ships of the world come into the port, they still run on the engines that powers the ships. A few places in the world, we are now shifting the ships to electricity and the grid. And if we will pilot this also here in Mumbai. And
when is that happening? Sorry.
Well, this will be happening in the near future.
Oh, great.
But that will require even more renewable energy. So I think actually the story around the ports is one of electrification. It's one of more PPAs or solar and wind, and it's about electrifying these assets for the future. On the ships, of course, it's. We sit here with Albert Maersk in the background. This ship is a multi-fuel ship that can go on green methanol. And green methanol comes from green hydrogen, where we add cryogenic CO2. Many of this comes from the farming community. And then you create methanol, which is an alcohol you can burn in the engines. And we think that India has a great opportunity, both because of the abundance of clean, renewable energy opportunities, but also because of the cryogenic CO2 from the farming sector that can be a real power player in the production of these new fuels for the future.
Would APM or Maersk in some way assist or invest in the production of these fuel as well? There are a lot of investment and plans on green hydrogen farms, methanol, etc. Would you play a part in that as well?
So when we built these ships, we ordered a number of them, and to power the ships, we needed over 1 million tons of green methanol, which didn't exist in the world.
Right.
So we have actually gone in and with private companies and said, look, we need to get this methanol produced. And there we did long-term economic agreements to facilitate the production of methanol, simply to get it started. As you know already, making the shift from a carbon-based economy to something else is a massive shift across multiple industries. In shipping, we are not 100% sure about which technology will win in the end, but we took the decision that it was important to get started. And I think we should be very happy by the fact now that there is over 100 green methanol ships in the world that has been ordered, and this could be part of the future energy mix.
Right. No, but is India part of your initiatives?
I mean, for the world to shift from carbon to other energy sources and all these molecules that has to come from renewables, it's very hard to see that happening without India playing a very big role in that.
Right. Tell me one or two global questions to just bring an end to this conversation. Does the looming problem of overcapacity across the world, because order logbooks stretch till 2030, there are a lot of defunct Chinese shipyards that are coming back to life. Is that a problem that worries the Maersk management?
If you look historically on shipping, we have gone through cycles where supply and demand is moving, as you were saying. And I think we are looking at another cycle now. I think what is new in shipping today is that the amount of disruptions that is hitting the markets is unprecedented. And so the big question is, what will happen with capacity and how will this pan out exactly? So we'll have to see how this unfolds. One of the things that we are offering our customers with the new Gemini network is, of course, a different value proposition where we have started now to make shipping precise again.
Mm-hmm.
So the collaboration with Hapag-Lloyd and the Gemini network will go from this highly volatile shipping model to something that's precise and on time, which will really allow the companies of the world to get more resilience into their supply chain. So we are focusing on serving our clients. We use the clients as our compass. And this is what we'll continue to do also as supply and demand moves up and down as it's done always.
Right. On US and its new tariff regime, do you see it having an impact on shipping trade in the years to come?
I think if we look at trade historically, we think we will continue to trade a lot with each other in the future. And we have seen both countries and businesses being extremely agile in adapting to changing circumstances. And so what we are really focusing on at the moment is to listen to our customers and understand what is changing for them. And then we will serve them as and when that is needed. But what I can say so far is that we see more trade happening and we see the trade patterns being what they have been for a while. So
okay, so you don't see a drastic change because of this new tariff.
So it's not, first of all, I mean, I think there's nothing implemented at the moment, and before any of this has any effect, we'll first of all have to find out what is really happening. So as everybody else, we are monitoring, and we will continue to stay close to that as we move forward.
Keith, Chris, thank you so much for being part of the Morning Brief. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you
Keith.
very much.
Thank you. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on the Morning Brief. It was produced by me and Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Rajas Naik. A new episode of the Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on a listening platform of your choice. Have a good rest of the week.